everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dan Height, and this is Flies in the Kitchen. Jeromy Laux is on the show today, and he is a true visionary. He's a photographer who has traveled all over the world to capture what I can only really describe as the essence of the people that he meets. You'll see what I mean. Now, this one is another photographer, so it'll be important for you to check out the pictures we're talking about. He is on Instagram at Jeromy Laux. Spelling is important here, so double check. And at lauxcreative.com. I've included pictures on this episode's page, a lot of them actually, at the podcast link at danheight.com as well. So there really isn't much reason why you can't follow along. Plus, I really think you'll want to see what we're talking about. I think what captures me most about Jeromy is his ability to connect with the people he's photographing. He is deeply compassionate. He takes a genuine interest in the people he interacts with. He also has a tremendously good eye for creating a perfect shot, whether it's a landscape, an animal, or a human being. You know, the potential absurdity of an audio podcast episode about photography is not lost on me. But I think that you'll agree that after the episode with Wise, I think we can do it pretty well. I think just being able to describe a craft and a process in such a way that really digs at the core of the story. And I think you're going to get a really good sense of who Jeromy is just by listening to him talk about his approach to taking pictures and just his passion for taking pictures. And especially how well he gets to know his subjects. I know I learned a ton. As a matter of fact, I learned that I didn't quite know him as well as I thought I did. But we'll get that out of the way in the first 15 seconds or so. One last thing. We talk for a good long time about one specific gentleman whose portrait Jeromy took, and for the purposes of this podcast, Jeromy decided he'd like to keep him anonymous. See, the man's story is a rather difficult one, and Jeromy wanted to be sensitive to that. So don't be alarmed when the audio goes out whenever you hear a spot where you think you should hear a name. Okay, here's my conversation with Jeromy Laux. So first of all, I got your last name right. Is it Lowe?
It's actually Laux.
It's Laux?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
It's probably supposed to be Lowe.
Okay.
But my whole family goes by Laux, so that's what I stick with.
Really?
Yeah.
How have I missed that?
I don't know. A lot of people do it, and I just don't correct anyone.
Okay.
To be honest, I don't really mind that much.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
There's a part of me that's wondered if I should just try to make it Lowe, but that just it's not worth it.
Well,
I've gone by Laux my whole life. So.
maybe Lowe would be more of an artsy sounding name, but
Probably,
Laux.
yeah.
Laux. Got it. I mean, did you grow up in Ohio then?
Yeah, I grew up in Springfield, Ohio.
Springfield.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because
Yeah.
I was headed out there for something once.
Yeah. I was raised in Dayton until I was 9, and then my parents built a house in the country in New Carlisle, and then I went to high school in Springfield, Northwestern High School. It's a farm town, kind of area. Yeah.
Were you farmers?
No, we weren't, but we lived like right next to a cornfield, which was like
That counts,
huge.
I think.
So I guess you could call us farmers.
Yeah.
It's not ours, but
Was it your corn?
yeah, nope.
Did you ever go hide out in the cornfield?
Yes, all the time. Actually, I lost one of our dogs in the cornfield once.
Oh, no.
It was like literally against our property.
Uh-huh.
We had 3.5 acres, and the cornfield was right against our property. And so one day we got a dog. 3 days later, he walked into the cornfield and got disoriented and never came back.
Wow, like puppies of the corn.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I like to say that he's still out there somewhere,
Yeah.
just feeding on corn. And
You know, every Halloween night,
yeah.
you might hear a howling.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. So you said you had brothers or sisters?
Yeah, I have one brother and one sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where do you line up in the mix?
I'm the youngest. My brother's 3 years older than me, and my sister's 9 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we actually have a lot of similar passions. All three of us, really. My sister's a really talented painter.
Oh,
My
nice.
brother's a really talented film photographer, illustrator.
Wow.
Yeah, my dad's an incredibly gifted singer-songwriter.
No kidding.
Yeah, and my mom owns a cleaning business.
Wow.
So it's kind of interesting how we all kind of share some sort of creative passion.
That's amazing.
And my brother and I are the only ones to have like really pursued that as our career. And my sister lived in Nicaragua, Guatemala for like 10 years, and is now back with her kids, my niece and nephew.
Wow. So there was some sort of gene there.
Yep.
There had to have been, right?
I think so. Yeah, I would say we probably got it from our dad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I saw a picture that you posted of yourself opening up a camera when you.
Oh, yeah.
You were, I don't know, 1998 or something.
Yeah, 98. I think I was 9 years old.
9 years old?
Yeah, you'd have to do the math. I was
Okay.
born in 90. Well, I guess I would have been 6 years old.
Was that your first camera?
I don't know, honestly. It's the earliest photo I have of me with a camera.
Okay.
Yeah, but I cannot remember myself before I started taking photos. It's a hard question to answer, like when I started getting excited about photography, video, design, that kind of stuff.
So you don't really have much of a memory of it beginning.
I would say, yeah, none.
Huh.
I have early memories of me playing around with my parents' like VHS recorder, making like claymation videos with my Play-Doh.
Nice.
Really, since I was a kid, I just kind of had a camera to use. And I remember probably the first time I asked myself if I was, I guess, air quotes, good at this, was when I was taking photos in Washington, D.C. On an 8th grade field trip.
Okay.
I still have those photos,
Okay.
actually. Yeah, in 8th grade. So,
Well, I'll have to share those.
yeah, yeah.
If you have those.
Yeah.
So your earliest memory of that, you said making claymation videos and things like that.
Yeah, claymation videos, yep.
There's something I'm always curious. When you said my earliest memory, I've always been curious about people's first memory period.
Oh, man.
Can you think of what your earliest memory is?
Memory. That is a tough question. It's so hard because I ask myself, do I remember this because I have like home videos of it, or do I remember it because I was there? If that makes sense.
Of course.
Because my earliest memories were documented.
Okay.
So let me think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I have like all of my memories were probably my earliest memories were significant events, like holidays, or events that weren't so fun, like traumatic events.
Right.
And I'd say those were the things when I think back about like my like bank of memories. They have a common thread of being significant. They were not just kind of like normal day events. They were like someone like a significant family member had passed,
Right.
or like a really fun holiday experience to see my family. Maybe I'm always surprised that I have vivid memories of my grandma's funeral, and I was so young when that happened. But I remember the doors, like the color of the doors. I remember that, like seeing people crying. I think it was like my first experience of loss when I was a little kid. I was probably 2, like super young. And there's no way I could have remembered those things. So I can confidently say like, yeah, this was my memory. And it was affirmed by my parents by like describing that scene to them and them saying like, yeah, you're right. Like those things were actually there.
Huh.
And I'm like, wow, I can actually remember remember that.
Well, that's not so unusual. I mean,
Yeah.
when you said some of the memories you could remember that they're significant or they're, and in some cases traumatic. I mean, I think those are the ones that imprint the most when we're small.
Right.
I mean, I remember it was such a insignificant thing, now, but when I was, I don't know, 3 maybe,
Yeah.
I was trying to help by carrying my own plate to the sink, and
Oh.
I dropped it, and I heard it hit the floor and crash and go in
Oh,
100
no.
pieces, and it just freaked me out. And it wasn't, my parents weren't even home. We were the babysitter.
Right.
So I was afraid that I was going to get in trouble, and I thought, she would be mad at me, and so I have a very visual memory of that happening.
Right. I'm very much so a locational person where it comes to my memory.
Yeah.
When I'm trying to think back, I remember things by where I was.
Mm-hmm.
And so even hearing you say that, it like jogged my memory. I remember one time, I was a sensitive kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would cry at the smallest stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Usually when I was so concerned about how I was making other people feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I still am that way, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was younger, it was like elevated times 10.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was a little kid on the beach, we were collecting seashells, and I like jokingly took one away from my dad, and my dad like jokingly back to me, acted like he was sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it like crushed me. But I like cried myself to sleep that night. I don't know what it was, but I can still remember that. Also, a really early memory of like me, this feeling of like I just hurt someone's feelings. It's always been something. I would say that really describes me as a person. I'm a type of person that's afraid to like hurt people's feelings. I want people to make sure that they know I appreciate them or they feel cared for. And if I communicate the opposite of that, it's like kind of devastating to me. So that's another early memory that I can think of.
Real packed with emotion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
I guess it doesn't surprise me then that you would grow to be such a, I don't know. I think I'm going to look at this a little bit later, but
Yeah.
when you're talking about the photos and your portraits that you're doing,
Yeah,
there is so much empathy and connection in the prints that in the eyes of the people that you're with, they're not strangers
yeah.
anymore to you.
Well, thank you for saying that. Yeah,
Because I have seen a lot of pictures where people, they just take pictures of people and
Yeah.
they're strangers, but like the
Right.
most recent one that you did of,
yeah,
and we're going to talk about in a second.
yeah,
His eyes are telling such a story.
yeah.
And then I don't know. It seems like a tragic gratitude.
Man, it's so cool that you say that, because I would say that is how I would describe what he was talking to me about.
Really?
That day. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's get to that in
Yeah.
a second. I want to ask you about, because you obviously have built an amazing career over being in people's spaces.
Yeah.
and being in their personal lives and recording that.
Yeah.
And either on video or on film. And one of the neatest things that I've seen lately has been the exhibit that you did from Iceland, which
Yeah.
was all on 35 millimeter film.
Yeah.
Which-
And 120 millimeter, actually.
and 120
Yep.
millimeter
Yep.
film.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, which are not commonplace anymore
Yeah.
in the digital age that we live in.
Expensive, yeah.
It's expensive.
Yes.
It's expensive, and
Yeah.
but I think I want to ask you about, first of all, I talked to a photographer a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
and she was starting to talk about doing some things on film as well.
Fun.
And I said, that's great. I said, you just don't see that much anymore. And she says, well, I think that some photographers are getting back into it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that's happening, that some are really going back to film, or do you think people are really just taking a hold of the digital and running with that?
Well, the reality is there's absolutely no reason to go back to film when it comes to, like, is it practical? Is it affordable? Is it worth the money? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it good for your career? It depends on how you're looking at it.
Right.
If you were to ask me, is it worth going back to film just for like personal projects? I would have a totally different answer than to say, is it worth going back to film for like for client work?
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think they're two different conversations.
Sure.
Personally, I love film. It's so fun.
Mm-hmm.
It brings the magic back to photography. Like it is like the absolute, like, it's the roots of where photography came from. Mm-hmm. And for me, I love to explore that, to go back and to see where like things started. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously it goes back even further than that, but it's so fun to be able to play with a film camera and knowing that like my grandpa used to shoot on this and my dad.
Yeah.
Just to see what that was like. It takes so much longer to get the results, and it's not instant gratification with being able to see it on your screen. Right. So it just kind of gives you this new appreciation for photography and where it came from. And it teaches you patience, and you can snap 1,000 photos with a digital camera, but like every photo is intentional with film. Like you have to be really careful not to shoot too many shots because it's expensive, like I said. Mm-hmm. And it gives you this sense of like, man, I need to be careful with this shot. I need to press the button at the right time. And what I found with my portraiture work when I'm using film is it's so much more fun as a relational tool because I'm not distracted by looking at the results. Mm-hmm. And I'm also really intentional about when to press the button, which gives the subject a sense of comfortability and to know that I am with them and not with my camera, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. Well, a couple of things that I take from that and that I agree with, especially in the idea that the instant gratification of digital is absolutely a big factor.
Yeah.
And it's not just on cameras anymore. It's in everybody's pocket.
Yeah.
So you can take a picture or film a movie, as people have done and have gone to win awards on movies shot on iPhones.
It's awesome.
And it's really amazing, the technology. And I think it's great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
But I also agree that the patience aspect of it, not only the patience of having to wait, until you're finished with the roll and wait for that developing to be finished, but just the patience in finding the right shot.
Exactly.
I've never been a serious photographer, but I did use a film, an old EOS Rebel 2000.
Nice.
The starter pack for anybody that really wants to take pictures. And I made a point to really be careful on where I was shooting.
Right.
I didn't know any different at that time
Yeah.
because they didn't really have digital photography
Yeah.
yet. But and if it, maybe there was, but only really wealthy people had it.
Right.
So, but yeah, the patience and the intentionality, I believe, are
in a way, like that whole Iceland project for me, I have a hard time like trying to identify, like I'm trying to figure out like why I did it, and I don't really know. I tend to be like impulsive with things, but I knew like going to Iceland with film would be risky, and I could come back and all the shots would be overexposed or damaged in the X-ray machine, and I knew that like I could potentially run out of film and not have the ability to take more photos. I had digital equipment. I could have brought it, but I made myself not take it. And like even my friends that were going with me, my fiance at the time, one of my best friends, Jordan, my roommate, Evan, they came with me on the trip. And even they thought it was kind of odd that I wasn't bringing an alternative camera. But I told myself, I was like, I know that I will use it, and I don't want to. So I'm going to leave it. And I'm so glad that I did it, because I was legitimately like every day I'd wake up and I would portion my film. I would make sure that I had enough for the day and I was taking the proper amount of images. And it was so fun. like literally so fun. And I would be caught in rainstorms, and I'd have to hide my camera underneath my raincoat and try to change film in my raincoat. Just seeing like the different things that would happen, like light leaks and all that kind of stuff that happens when you're using film, was just so fun for me. And having to wait 2 weeks to see the results after I get back was so fun too. Just that, like, it added a whole nother element of just surprise to the whole trip. And then when you got those photos back, you felt like you actually got to relive it. And see, like, oh man, that portrait turned out great, or that portrait just didn't turn out great. That was awful. But it was just so fun to see how they turned out.
I mean, how did you make the decision to go in the first place?
Yeah.
and to take only film shots?
Yeah, good question. I'd say in short, I don't really know.
Okay.
But I think if I really was starting to dissect, like, really what led me to do it, probably the movie Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he shot film there too, so I think I was subconsciously, like, influenced by that.
Okay.
I think. And I've always wanted to go to Iceland since I was a kid. I guess it seemed like the most far out, mysterious place I could go to at the time. And so since I was younger, I'm like, I want to go to Iceland, and I finally did it. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So, I mean, I'm interested. I'm not a photographer by any stretch. I'll play with the manual settings on my phone sometimes, but walk me through a shot, like setting up what you need to set up. If you're looking at aperture, if you're looking at your f-stops or whatever, you know what I mean? How you, especially knowing that this is your one opportunity to get it right.
Yep.
How do you know without making a ton of mistakes?
Yeah.
And not being able to develop them in Iceland?
Yeah, good question. I brought an external light meter, which was actually an app on my cell phone.
Oh, okay.
So you can tap on the light source that you want to expose to. And so I would tap on that light source, and then it would tell me where I need to be with my shutter or aperture. And I'm able to, like, identify well enough, like, because your ISO is in your film when it comes to film. So there's three kind of categories if you know anything about photography. It's ISO, shutter speed, aperture.
Okay.
In digital world, ISO is a function of your actual camera. And in the
And
film
ISO
world,
say that what that is.
so it's
exactly.
ISO. It stands for International Standardization Organization.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
I
So
always wondered.
yeah, but ISO is basically how light sensitive is the film.
Okay.
So I had to pick an ISO to take, and I picked 120 ISO. Oh, I'm sorry, 160 ISO film. So that's what I decided to bring to Iceland with me, because it was a lot of outdoor photography. And then it's tough because every light situation's different, and I could get it to a ballpark range just by knowing about photography, shooting digital long enough. I don't really need to have that meter. But even in the digital world, when you're manually exposing, you have a little meter on the inside of the viewfinder, and it'll tell you kind of where you're at, like in the middle, you're overexposed, you're underexposed. And in film photography, you don't have that luxury anymore.
Right.
So I could take a photo and guess about where I need to be. But, I had a lot of projects that were contingent on the development of this film. So I needed to have that, like, assurance that I had at least a close enough exposure so that I can actually make something of the shots.
Wow.
And even back in the day, you would use external light meters.
Right.
Like,
That was going to be my next question. What did people do before we had apps?
Yeah. External light meters. They just took some batteries, and you would just, it's a little ball on the top, and you would hold it toward the light that you want to expose to.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is all things I had no idea about.
Yeah.
So this is interesting stuff. So the thing that I am, especially interested in, just being the nature of this show that I do, is I love to hear people's stories.
Yeah.
And I know that you do too.
Yeah, me too.
And that's a huge thing for you when you're taking pictures of people. And first of all, just the the courage to walk up to somebody that you don't know,
Yeah.
especially if that person is, I mean, homeless. You've been doing a lot of those lately.
Yeah.
And just striking up a conversation with that person, and then finally getting pictures that are just so all-encompassing
Yeah.
of who that person is.
Thank you for saying that.
Well, what do you do? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
get to that person? How do you get to that person's space without being a creep?
It's so funny that you asked that, because it's a tough one to talk about, because I, for one, am always surprised by how willing people's willingness to open up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe I have some sort of like special power. I don't know. But I think I asked Lisa, who is a homeless person that I just met the other day, and I asked her. I was like, she took me back to her campsite where she was living underneath an overpass, showed me around, just me and her. And I'm like, why are you trusting me so much? I'm just like, I just met you, and you're willing to take me back here. And she said this to me. She's like, well, you have a trustworthy face. And I was like, well, thank you. I think that's a compliment. So I don't know. Maybe that's it. I personally like to check my heart, and I consider myself to be pretty introspective in the fact that I don't want to have... I want to make sure I have good motives behind what I do. I don't want to make someone feel exploited or that I am using them to get some sort of fame or popularity. And I have to ask myself, is that what I'm doing? We all have sin and darkness to us. And I have to ask myself, what is my motive? Why am I wanting to talk to this person? Why do I want to hear their story? And I like to think it's because I just actually care, and I genuinely like to make people feel like they're valued and they're worth something. And personally, I just love to hear people's stories, and I like to feel like people care about my story. So I know what that's like, to feel like someone cares about you. So when I meet someone just passing me on the street, or I walk up to someone to thinking in my mind, I'd like to take this person's portrait. My number one thing that I want to communicate to them is that I value them as a person, and I am excited to hear who they are and their story. And photography and their portrait is secondary. I get turned down a lot. You see the photos that I actually do take, but you don't get to see the ones that I don't get to. And there are people who say they don't want their photo taken. And I think that's kind of some of my favorite times, is when someone says no, because then I can express to them my true heart and the fact that I genuinely did just want to meet them. And so afterwards, when they say no, I'm like, that's totally fine. And I continue to still ask them like their story and who they are, and not walk away with a photo. And those have been some of the most humbling experiences for me. There's no sort of gain or benefit from it. It's just simply like a truly motivated by like wanting to hear someone's story and talk to them. I don't know. People like to be heard. So
Yeah.
And the people that I like to choose to take photos of are the marginalized, the people who don't get a chance to be in the spotlight, the people that I feel are great individuals who just haven't had the chance to have a voice. And I really see my work as an opportunity to give them that.
So tell me, what was the story?
So was a normal guy. He has 6 kids. As part of it, I'm like, I kind of want to be sensitive to the fact that
Sure.
I don't know if he wants everyone to know.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, but he has 6 kids, totally normal guy, made some really bad mistakes. He did some really stupid things. And what I loved about him was that he was willing to admit that. Mm-hmm. He got in a car accident, and it messed with his brain. Mm-hmm. He got some really bad brain damage. Mm-hmm. And he had a wife at the time, still does. His wife's currently in prison. And his oldest is 27, and his youngest is like 3 years old.
Wow.
At this time when he was telling me this story, he was mowing grass to make money. And he was mowing in a pretty bad area because he had lost his job from the car accident. And the homeowner started compensating him with meth. So he would compensate him with meth, and that on the street that would sell for $200 versus getting paid $20 to mow the lawn. So like the homeowner would literally present him with two options. They'd say, I'd give you this meth that's worth $200 on the street, or I'll give you a $20 bill to compensate you for mowing my lawn. This is how he was earning money because he had lost his job previously. He picked the meth because he knew he could sell that for more. He had used a couple of times, he said, but he never got addicted to it. It was never a habitual thing. And one day he had the meth in a glove box in his car, and he had his infant child in the back seat. Cop pulls up, searches his car, and quickly takes the meth out of the glove box, tosses it to his wife, and under the impression that she's going to hide it, and she doesn't, and she gets busted for possession of meth and gets put in jail. Takes the bullet for her husband, and he's in tremendous guilt for that. And I'd say a crippling amount of guilt for that. Still gets to talk to his wife for 30 minutes a week, but has lived underneath an overpass in downtown Columbus for 5 years. And he said he's only received an invitation to something 3 times, and he's only been visited by people who aren't homeless, like his fellow homeless friends, a handful of times. And I got the privilege to be able to hear him. And that's the story he told me that day. And he told me he would never change the fact that he was, he would never change his accident. He would never trade that for anything because he said it taught him the most in life. It's the reason he met his current wife. And he was able to love her better as a result of that. I got to ask him a bunch of questions about why he thinks that is. And so when you describe that portrait as tragic, like a tragic, beautiful piece or something like that.
I think I said tragic gratitude.
Tragic gratitude. It's a great way of explaining. It's a great description of that, because for that story that he told me that day was so full of just hurt and tragedy, but he was grateful for it. And so that's a really great way of describing that. And that's why I picked that portrait out of the few that I got. Because you can really see into his eyes that feeling of just absolute guilt and acknowledgement of the destruction that he has caused, and acceptance of where he's at, and willingness to admit that he was wrong. So I actually thought the other day, I'm like, what would I title that piece if I were to title it something? I would title it True Humility, because that's someone who is willing to say, I am wrong, and what I have done is wrong, and no one is at fault for where I currently am. He taught me a lot that day, just to see that true, authentic humility in him. Yeah.
Well, you've made that print available for purchase, and and the money's going towards
him. So on this Sunday, so it's probably by the time this podcast is up, it'll probably be gone. But this Sunday, me and a couple friends are going to go back and drop off some supplies for him that he's requested. Yeah.
So isn't something? Did I read something about the Coalition for the Homeless or something, or were you?
I found the most trustworthy organization on Facebook that I could, and just put them in the link of the portraits that I put up of Lisa. And it's raised $115, so that's great. People were given to it. Actually, Facebook asked me, "Do you want to tag a charity to this post?" And I was like, "Sure." So I did, and it did something good. So,
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. So where else have you been?
I've been all over Central America, all over Canada, and all over Europe. So Ireland, Switzerland, Paris, all over Italy, Venice, Pompeii, Rome, Milan. And when I was in Switzerland, I stayed in Zermatt, went to Bern and Lausanne. I think that's how you pronounce it, Lausanne or something. And all over the United States, a lot of different states. Lived in Scotland for 3 months. Yeah, I've been around. Yeah, I've been to a lot of different places.
So of all those places, who has captured you the most?
Captured me.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
As you were.
Yeah, as I was there.
As you were there taking pictures.
Yeah, love that. When you ask that question, are you referring to like the beauty, or the people, like the beauty of the landscape, or the individuals,
okay,
the culture?
Okay, so let's break it up into two things,
Yeah.
And let's talk about the moments, whether it's in nature, like a moment in nature,
Yeah.
Scenery, landscapes, what I guess you could say took your breath away the most,
Yeah.
and what person
Yeah.
did you connect with the most, or connected with you the most?
And they can be different places,
Sure,
correct?
sure.
Right. The person I can never forget is a person who didn't even speak my language. I didn't speak his language, I guess is a better way of putting it. I don't know his name. I don't even know anything about him. He was just a homeless man in Rome. And his shirt said, "Sorry, we're closed." Just a super happy, jolly guy. And he was always in the same area. I was there for 11 days and he never left. He was just circling the same area with a grocery cart. So one day I was crossing the street. Third day I had saw him. I have noticed him before. And he spilled his grocery cart all over the road. He was in the middle of the road. It was a mess. So I ran up to him. I helped him pick up his stuff and put it in the cart, while people are kind of like watching him and laughing, just because he's a kind of a goofy looking homeless man, you know. And he looked up at me smoking a cigarette, and he was just thankful. He said something. I didn't know what he said. And we just kind of had this like connection, if that makes sense. And I just smiled at him. He smiled at me. I shrugged my shoulders like he knew I didn't understand what he was saying. And he he just laughed. And I pointed at my camera after we kind of had that interaction and just asked if I could take his portrait, basically, with, gestures. And he let me. And he was just such an interesting guy. Like, just had so much character to him. And I think it's just a testament of the power of nonverbals, gestures, and facial expressions. And that day I remember walking away. I'm like, I have no idea who he is. I'll never be able to get in touch with him again. And I was just so thankful he let me take his photo. You may have seen it. It just says sorry on it.
Yeah, I did see that.
So, yeah, that was probably the biggest like connection that I had with an individual, just because it was like a testament to that like nonverbals and
Right.
Now place. That's so hard. Because every place is so unique and beautiful to me. And every place has different parts to it that are just so, I don't know, just beautiful. I think I'm in between Scotland and Banff, Canada. And I would say Scotland because and Ireland's really cool too, but Scotland because of the culture and the beauty. Just so beautiful and unique, unlike any place I've seen. And I got to spend 3 months of my life there. So it really turned into like a second home for me. And Banff is just absolutely mind-blowing. It's like one of the most beautiful places. The mountains are just absolutely unreal, and I think it's one of the most underrated places on Earth.
Where is this again?
Banff, Canada.
Banff? Oh, Canada.
Yeah.
Okay.
Canadian Rockies, just absolutely gorgeous. There's a photo right up there, actually, of it. Top one. Yeah. Wow. Just such a beautiful place. So, and that's Scotland, the coup right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on the left.
Wow.
For those of you listening in, I'm pointing at things on my shelf in my apartment.
Well, your shelf is covered in your work.
Yeah.
Or your apartment is covered in your work.
Yeah. Well, not awesome. The posters. The posters are...
No, not the posters.
Yeah.
But, your photos. And...
Yeah.
All right, so here's the last one.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to think too hard on it.
Okay. I'll try to answer it right away.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, well, you can think if you want.
Yeah.
So Kodak...
Yep.
has given you their last roll of film, and there's only 5 exposures on it.
Whew.
And they love you. They think you're the greatest, and they want you to take pictures of whatever you want to take pictures of.
Yeah.
That describe what humanity really is all about. And then we'll feature it, and you will be completely famous.
You know what this reminds me of? The movie Secret Life of Walter Mitty.
Does it really?
Have you seen it?
I might have a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't want to ruin it for people because like this is like the end of the
movie. Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a very similar objective that they gave one of their National Geographic photographers, but it was the end of Life magazine.
Oh, okay.
Like they basically told him, you have the project is to take a photo for the last edition of Life magazine for our cover.
Wow.
What is it going to be? And he submitted it, and then the whole movie's about this journey of Ben Affleck. I think that's who it is. Ben Affleck? Ben Stiller.
Ben Stiller.
Bill and Stiller.
They're a little bit different.
Going out on a journey to find this last film negative because it was lost. Okay.
But you get 5.
I get 5, so... And that's such a hard question.
And you can go anywhere. They're footing the bill.
Sorry, I'm going to have to think about it. I'm going back on my word.
That's okay.
So they're picking one, or they're going to take all 5?
They're going to feature all 5.
Oh, they're going to feature all 5. I would definitely do a series. I would do something that would unify all 5.
Okay.
It wouldn't just be 5 separate standalones. It would be something that had to do with one another, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And you said life is the kind of the humanity. I would feature 5 different stories, all from vastly different walks of life, personality, age, race, in different places around the world, and highlight the commonalities between all 5. And personally, I feel a deep connection with every person in the world. I think we all do. We like to put ourselves in groups in different cliques and whatever. And I would argue that we're all much more alike than we realize. And I think it would be a fun opportunity to show that humanity is one. Like we're all a part of the same group. And as much as we like to divide, we're all a part of the same group. We're all humans. We all have the same desires. We all have emotion. So that's what I would do. I would take all 5 shots and I would highlight 5 different stories and try to find the most vastly diverse people from each other, like the most vastly different people from one another with all 5. So maybe someone who's crazy wealthy and successful, and someone from the bottom of the food chain who's considered like an absolute social outcast. Mm-hmm. Maybe someone right in the middle, different religions, and just show that we really do have the same heartbeat. Hmm. Does that answer your question?
It's your question. Does it answer it?
I think so. I think that's what I would do. So okay. Yes, that is the answer to the question. If I had more time, maybe I would change it, but I think that's what I would do.
Well, you can think of it, and then when that time comes, then you can take those pictures.
When Kodak reaches out with their last 5.
That's right.
Yeah.
And they'll say, "Thank you, Jeromy Laux."
Yeah.
Well, what's going on next for you?
So just in life in general, or just project? Yeah, because next I'm going to go get dinner.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. What about professionally?
I'm shooting. So actually, I love doing portrait tours. I love doing photo work, and that's primarily what we talked about today. Mm. But the truth is, like, what consumes most of my time is video. Mm. I love video. I really do.
Yeah.
I just got my first cinema camera. Really excited about that. Panasonic EVA 1. And I've started to get my foot in the door with some corporate work here in Columbus. So the project that I'm currently working on is with Good Deed Rags. You probably know it.
Oh, sure.
Yep. And I'm shooting their Vision mission video. So that's probably the one that I'm looking the most forward to right now. And I have 18 weddings to shoot this summer. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I do a lot of weddings as well. Mm-hmm. If I can make portrait photography my full-time job, I would.
Yeah.
But I don't think I'll ever stop loving everything. Like, I love design, I love video, I love photo. And if you like look back on the last 5 years of my life, you'll have seen that I switched my focus so much.
Sure.
And I'd say the most common thing that I've always done is photography.
Yeah.
But even I don't know what I'm doing exactly or where I'm going. I'm just kind of just doing whatever seems fun, I guess. Yeah. And when I feel like I'm being called to do. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, man.
Yeah, of course.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Honey, it looks like rain. Looks like that storm's rode its way back in again. And I don't want to be there when the levee finally breaks. Honey, it looks like rain.
Well, that was Jeromy Laux. I have to keep repeating that in my head now, apparently. What a great guy, though. I wish we had a little bit more time, but I think we got it done, right? At Jeromy Laux is his Instagram. LauxCreative.com is the website. danheidt.com/podcast is mine. There you can catch up on all the previous episodes like Robbie Schaefer, Wise, and the legendary 2-part episode with Ron Freeman. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and leave me a review if you don't mind. Oh, and big thanks to JT Hillier for the use of his music. That's what you're hearing right now, and it's also what you heard at the very beginning. Be sure and check him out, jthilliermusic.com. Okay, everybody, that's all I've got. Thanks again for listening, and let's go make some stories.
Na na like we're gone. It's like we're the light in a room that's lost in all the darkness and the dawn. And all that's left in the emptiness is a sad song. Honey, it looks like we're gone.